Hello everyone, I'm Denise Boggs, and I want to welcome you as we journey together through healing the heart. Okay, I want to just talk a little bit about the stony heart. You know, in Ezekiel 36:26, God says, I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh. I'll take it away. Now, He'll take it away, but you've got to let it go. Okay? If you've lived with an offense or hurt or even a vow you made of, I'll show you. Do you know that can be a stone in your heart? I'll show you. I'll show you. Okay, so, all right. A stony heart can be pinpointed even by things that upset you, things that offend you, even things that discourage you. Did you know that? Can be coming from something painful that happened years ago, and it just shut your heart, closed your heart. And now you can't even get a word in that area that activates you because your heart is just closed and shut down. It can be something that was said as a child to you. Something was said, oh, you'll never amount to anything. And here you're a prophet of God that God sent to the earth to speak forth and bring life to others. But yet, because you believed that word that was spoken and it hurt you, then it just shut your heart down, closed your heart. And if your heart gets closed, it does harden, because you have to keep that life, the flow of God's love flowing and keeping your heart open. Now, I would say in all of my years, 25, 30 years now of ministering to people, what hardens the heart more than anything is your relationship with your earthly father. Okay? And it's because it's our earthly father's really assignment from God to awaken us, even as little ones. Awaken our spirit, awaken us. Okay? And then we can receive and be awakened fully by our Heavenly Father. But when your earthly father is not there, or if he's harsh, if he's abusive, if he's just totally tuned out, and you don't get awakened in a certain area, that's when your spirit slumbers and sleeps. That's just when you just give up. Okay, now I'm going to give you a verse for you to study on this, okay? Because look, for Ezekiel 36 and 37 to come to pass, Ezekiel 36 and 37, where God takes the stony heart out, He gives you a new heart, and then you begin to prophesy, and you're called forth to do what God's called you to do, to call people to life that are hopeless, okay? But you got to get your heart ready to receive that word from God. Now listen to this. This is in Colossians. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Fathers, don't exasperate them. Then it goes on, so that they will not lose heart and become discouraged and unmotivated, with their spirit broken. Discouragement can be an area right there that pinpoints it. Start with that one place. Every area where you are easily discouraged or unmotivated, that's an area to work on in your heart. That's an area to work on, because it's shut your spirit shut down. And so that's an area. And so usually it is an earthly father where there's a hurt or pain or harshness, whatever happened, that caused you to shut down, become discouraged, and now you're 40 and God's called you to be a prophet to the nations, and you're discouraged. Can't do anything. So start with areas where you're easily discouraged or areas where you are just unmotivated, and deal with those so that God can take the stony heart out because you release it. Say, Lord, I'm ready. I'm ready. My dad didn't encourage me in this area, but I'm ready to forgive him and release him. I release him, Lord. And the Lord will take the stone out, and then He'll begin to awaken you with His Word, because He'll give you a heart that can receive from Him. That's a heart of flesh. You're open to receive now. As you're hearing the voice of the Lord calling you by name, it does wake you up. It wakes you up. Okay? Now, this is what David said in Psalms 27. He said, when my mother and father have forsaken me, the Lord calls me His own. He calls me. Wake up. Come on. Wake up. Come up. Wake up. Get up. Wake up. He calls me. He calls me by name. You know, and many times we can stay in a state of slumbering because our earthly father did not know who we were, didn't call us to rise up and be who God's called us to be. So we just slumber, just sleep, just go through the motions. But your spirit needs to hear the voice of God say, rise up, awaken. And He calls you by name. Okay? In Isaiah 43, it says again, He calls you by name. Okay, let me go there. I love this. He who formed you. Do not fear. I've redeemed you. Okay, I've redeemed you. In other words, you don't have to stay in this slumber, this hopeless situation. I've called you by name and you're mine. I've called you by name, okay? I've called you by name. So, when we're called by God, we know and it will activate us. But many times people just give up hope and think there's nothing for them to do. No, if you're living in this time in history, there's something for you to do. It's time to wake up. God's calling you by name. There's something you're to do. Okay? I'm going to read to you that this is in 1 Samuel. This is when, okay, listen to this. 1 Samuel chapter 3, it says this. And the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, Here am I. So he ran to Eli and said, Here am I. Here I am. For you called me. But Eli said, No, I didn't call you. You know, we could even say that sometimes the person that should have called us didn't call us. God's calling us to wake up. Here I am, for you called me. Eli said, I did not call you. Go lie down again. You know, Eli was on up in age. He couldn't even see clear by then. He was losing his sight. He was on up in age. He was tired. Okay? He was tired. Some of the prophets today are tired. Okay. So he went and lay down. Then the Lord called yet again, Samuel. So Samuel got up. And he went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. But Eli answered, I did not call you, my son. Lie down. Slumber. Go back and slumber. Do you know once you're called, there's a mentoring that takes place. But if the one you've been looking to call you to rise up is tired, they can't mentor you. They'll say, well, just go back and lay down. Just, calm down. Just, and so this is a word that if you know you've heard God call you, You have got to be mentored by someone that activates and carries out and doesn't tell you to go back and lie down and sleep. Oh, don't worry about it. Everything's going to work out. No, you may be called by God to speak into things. Okay, so now Samuel did not know or personally experience the Lord, and the word of the Lord was not yet revealed directly to him. So the Lord called Samuel a third time. And he stood up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you did call me." Then Eli understood that it was the Lord who was calling the boy. Many of you listening to this podcast have been called since you were a child. You know it. I knew I was called as a child. I knew. And I knew that I was called, but there was no one at that time that confirmed it to me. And it was kind of like with Eli. I was just told to be quiet and sit down. Be quiet. Sit down. Be quiet. And I would get prophetic things and say them. Nobody knew what to do with it. Do you know that if you grew up in a home where your prophetic voice was not either understood, recognized, or even affirmed, you may have just gone and shut down. Your spirit just shut down. But if you've been called since a child, God's calling you now to rise up, to not slumber and sleep. Listen to this. Awake, sleeper, and arise from the dead. This is in Ephesians 5. And Christ shall shine as dawn upon you and give you light. Give you light. Therefore, see that you walk carefully, living your life. Do you know, prophetic life is a very strategic life. Living life with honor, purpose, and courage. Courage. You overcome discouragement with courage. So therefore, see that you walk carefully, living life with honor, purpose, and courage. Shunning those who tolerate and enable evil. As a prophetic voice, you have to draw the line. You have to draw the line with people that compromise. You have to draw the line, set a boundary. In my last podcast, I was talking about setting boundaries. Someone with a prophetic voice, a prophetic gift, has to set boundaries. That they are not influenced and drawn in, be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Galatians 5 says. So, once your spirit's waking up, you're rising up, you know who you're called to be, you've got a word, okay? Then you've got to steward this gift that God's given you. He's called you by name. He's called you. If you're a Samuel, He's called you by name. Okay? And Paul's saying it this way, it's like, okay, living life with honor, purpose, courage, shunning those who tolerate and enable evil, not as unwise, but as wise, sensible, intelligent, discerning people. Making the very most of your time. Okay, with all diligence, therefore do not be foolish and thoughtless, but understand, firmly grasp what the will of the Lord is. Okay, don't be foolish. If you know, like Samuel, you've been called. You've been called. He knows you by name. He's called you by name. Rise from the dead. Wake up. And then, don't be foolish. Walk in your calling. Learn to set boundaries. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. And I just want to really encourage you to go back and look at the podcast on setting boundaries, because the prophets of God that don't set boundaries, they can't carry out the full assignment of God. They can't. They have to be able to withstand any opposition and still speak truth. And so if they get into confusion, someone says, oh, I don't agree with you, then they have to know how to posture themselves as a prophet of God. Say, okay, well, that's fine, but this is the word I hear from God. So let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything more than that is confusion, comes from the evil one. And so today, in this time in history, the prophets of God have got to get their hearts healed, the stones removed, they get a clear word from God, and speak truth to awaken those that are hopeless, lost, in confusion. So learn to hear from God, hear His voice, wake up, hear His voice, wake up. He's speaking your name. You know, if you hear Him speak your name, you know He knows who you are, and you know who you are. Oh my goodness, I remember when God told me who I was, I'm like, oh my stars, that's who I am? I heard God say. And then God just began to confirm it. Once you know who you are, God will confirm it. Man won't confirm it. No, God does it. He will bring situations, then you're like, oh, that's who God says I am. So you will know, it'll line up. So I know this is a lot for this podcast, and just go back and view the one on Stony Heart, then the one on Boundaries, and then this one is my introduction to your identity based on who God says you are. Your identity is who God says you are, not who anybody else says. It's who God says you are. God called Samuel by name. God will call you by name.
If Living Waters has been a blessing to you and you would like to help support this ministry, you can give on our website, livingwatersministry.com/donate, or text any amount to 84321. We have additional resources for you to continue on your journey to healing in our online bookstore. You can click the link in description.